It's unbelievable to me that you go and invade a country and kill people, and there's no imminent threat other than the Epstein imminent threat. This guy is just pure evil. I have never been faced with the reality of seeing him, because I would want to spit on him. I would want to scream at him. So it's better not even for it to be a fantasy rather than a reality I have to deal with.
From Columbia Journalism School in New York City, this is Juan Manuel Benítez Wants to Know. There is no one in New York politics quite like Luis Miranda. He came from Vega Alta, Puerto Rico, to study psychology at NYU and wound up becoming one of the most powerful political consultants in the city's history. He's worked inside 3 mayoral administrations: Koch, Dinkins, and Giuliani. He founded the Hispanic Federation, and he ran campaigns for Hillary Clinton, Chuck Schumer, Kirsten Gillibrand, Fernando Ferrer, and Letitia James. His firm, the Miram Group, is the go-to operation when Democrats need to connect with Latino voters. And yes, his son is Lin-Manuel Miranda, the creator of Hamilton. But today I want to talk to the father, not about the son. I want to talk about 50 years of building Latino political power in this city, block by block. Luis Miranda, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Many, many, many thanks for having me here, Manuel. We haven't been together in a long time, so it's great to be together.
Luis, you arrived in New York in 1974 from Puerto Rico to study psychology. In your book, Relentless, you described yourself as a radically minded Puerto Rican activist in those early years. So what radicalized you, and what was it that de-radicalized you afterwards?
What radicalized me was really the conditions of living in a colony, on understanding little by little that everything in your country is dictated by a foreign place. That, yeah, you can collect garbage Monday or Tuesday, but the resources to collect that garbage comes from somewhere else. So deeply understanding that Puerto Rico was so dependent on a foreign empire really radicalized who I was. And sort of coming to New York, it was a different kind of radicalization. When you're in Puerto Rico, you are told that we sent to New York in the 50s and 60s the poor, the worst, the uneducated. But coming to New York and then being faced with the real statistics, you realize that migration from Puerto Rico to New York was a direct consequence of a planned political reality of Puerto Rico, and that in fact, coming here, we created our own conditions and raised our own next generation. So I don't know if it means that I was not radical anymore. It meant that the content, the reality, the context of my life changed. And with that, I started thinking which way I can be of most help in that new reality.
And you've said that when you got here, New Yorkers didn't see a difference between Puerto Ricans and immigrants because to this day, I believe many U.S. people, they don't really know that Puerto Rico is part of the United States. So how that shaped your political ideology, the fact that the Puerto Ricans were treated as any other Latino immigrants, even though they had a U.S. passport?
The Hispanic Federation, it's a next logical step for me. I realized that I wanted to build things that can withstand time, and sort of creating an institution where we were all part, even in spite of our differences, including uh, the fact that Puerto Ricans don't have to go uh, through the process of becoming citizens. We're all treated the same. This is in 1990, 36 years later. When ICE goes to the streets, they're looking for brown people. It doesn't matter if that brown person is Colombian or Puerto Rican. We're all in the same salad bowl as far as they're concerned.
You and Roberto Ramirez built the Miram Group, arguably the most important Latino political consultant firm in the Northeast, and you ran Fernando Ferrer's campaigns twice for mayor, and he lost both times. What did that teach you about the ceiling of the Latino vote or the Latino political power in New York City?
First thing I learned was the importance of numbers and polls and surveys and focus groups and sort of the scientific part of running a campaign. And Roberto and I used to kid all the time that he brought the art of running the campaign, and I brought the scientific part that I knew was important in running the campaign. And when we ran the first time, we needed to get 80% or 90%, between 80 and 90% of the Latino vote. However, you quickly realize that 90% has to be realized with 60% of voters. Even though there may be 100 people that are 18 plus, other circumstances means that 40 of them are not part of the equation of being voters. So the first thing on Freddie's campaign was, how do we make Latinos overperform? Because that is the only fighting chance we have to win this. And believe it or not, the last time around, we found a little under 200,000 Latinos who had only voted once in their life. They had voted for Hillary Clinton because she was like the queen. And spending resources in making sure that a chunk of those people who have only voted once voted again now for one of their own, for Freddie Ferrer, became key in making sure that we overperform. So it's part of what I learned in that early campaign of how do you pull together science, enthusiasm, convincing people, giving a reason for us to be able to succeed. And we were short by 20,000 votes in winning that first primary that ended up in 9/11. I have no doubt, because I know I saw enough polls that we were doing every night on the tracking part of the campaign, that if it was not for 9/11, Freddie Ferrer would have become the mayor of New York City, and our history as a city will be very, very different, with the possibility of having elected someone who represents 30% of the city, and we have not been able to come close again.
You wrote Relentless partly because you were, in your words, frustrated with how people were analyzing the Latino vote after Trump. Now we are 2 years into his second term as president. Has anything you were frustrated about actually changed?
The only thing that has changed, when you get old, you have all this wisdom. It's all bullshit. But you have all this wisdom. I wish I could go through life telling people, I told you this was going to happen. I told you this was going to happen. I told you that this was going to happen. You can't. Or at least I can't. Uh, all I can do is to make sure that those 42% of Latino men who saw in Trump a possibility to be empowered as Latino men, that they realize this was a shitty thing to do. And look what this dude is doing to the country and to our community. And let's make sure we find real alternatives to change our reality with real leaders.
And you've also said that the biggest mistake candidates make with Latino voters is to take us for granted, and to believe that they're all Democrats and they vote Democrat 100% of the time. Who in the Democratic Party is still making that mistake right now?
Everybody! Wish I could say este o la otra. Fortunately, it's an ethos that it's part of the party right now. Like, people were upset that 42% of Latino men voted for Trump, but not upset that 65% of white men voted for Trump. Why do we have to carry the burden? And that's the point. The point is that they think that magically we are part of a coalition. We have a lot of things in common with that coalition, but the only way to bring us into that coalition is to invest in making sure we understand why our interests are best served by the Democratic Party. And still, do you see real investments in Latino voters throughout the country? No, it's happening a bit at the local level, but still nationally, we have not received the kind of investments that allowed our community organizers, our political leaders, our community leaders to spend sustained time in our communities explaining why it's important that we vote Democrat.
And now, is that concept, the Latino vote, relevant or useful anymore for someone like you looking at the numbers, given that there are so many different communities within the Latino vote? Is it useful or relevant to talk about it? Or every 4 years, when people say, like, the next president of the United States cannot win without the support of the Latino vote, is it relevant anymore? Or we should be talking about working class voters, including Latino voters and other voters?
Because we're working class. It would be great if 20% of our population was being helped by the billionaire cuts that Trump and his administration is making. But it's not real. So we continue to be a monolithic economic group. Of course, some of us are doing better than others, but the fact is that we are overwhelmingly working class. So the real war that we are now fighting, it's the rich versus the poor. More and more, less people control the largest part of the resources that ought to be there for everyone. But it's also true that as a community, we colored our life differently So we need to talk about those economic advances that we need to make, but we are also, when you look at our statistics, usually at the bottom of the barrel everywhere in the country as Latinos become staples everywhere in the country. This is no longer Miami, New York, Los Angeles. This is now a reality that every state is living with. I went to Arkansas a couple of times, met uh, with Latino ministers who have so much influence over communities that are popping up all over rural areas in the U.S. We need to pay attention, uh, and those rural communities are a bit of everything. And they continue to identify themselves, not even as Latinos, with the radicalized term, but as Hispanics. So we need to have both in our agenda.
Since you just mentioned Latino and Hispanic, those two words, I'm going to ask you right now the most difficult and controversial question of this interview. Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, Latine. What do you make of the whole debate that we love to have within the Latino community 24/7?
I wish people will spend more time having that debate on how do we move our community out of poverty. Because whatever we call ourselves, we continue to be poor. And as we spend so much energy to pick the last political flavor and then being identified by that political flavor, it'll be much better if we spend time dealing with the real issue. That is not an issue.
Luis, what do you make of Zohran Mamdani's victory, the new mayor of New York City?
It goes hand in hand with what I spoke a couple of minutes ago. New York, it's becoming unaffordable. I see it in my neighborhood that I have lived in the same place of Dykeman in Washington Heights for 45 years. I have seen a lot of changes in that neighborhood that is a microcosm of what is happening in neighborhoods throughout the city of New York. And it is that we stayed there during the 80s and the 90s when we were the murder capital of New York. Now we're no longer the murder capital, but now the next condominium cost $4,200 for a one bedroom. It is that unaffordability that gives birth to leaders like our mayor, because he was very precise and consistent on the message. We are an unaffordable city. It will get worse. So people say, listen, I voted for this one. Last time I voted for Trump because we saw him as a rich man who knows how to make money. I'm now going to vote for this guy who is talking about the issues that worry me as a parent, as a resident of a neighborhood. So, message worked. And now he has to deliver.
New York City has a long tradition of identity politics, of ethnic politics, of Latinos, African Americans, white vote. Zohran Mamdani won the campaign for mayor without stressing any of those or highlighting per se any of those identity or ethnic communities like we've seen in the past. We always talk about how politicians always pander to Latinos or to African Americans or to other segments of the electorate. What does it mean for the way elected officials or political candidates in New York City do politics or run elections from now on?
That much has changed. How many videos in Spanish did the mayor make? Isn't that pandering? No, it's communicating to a segment of New York who consumes news and information in Spanish. So there is many ways in which you should pander. I call it communicating and connecting with communities. And he did. He did it through language. He did it through message. He did it by standing next to Latino leaders who serve as the people who introduced him to our community. So it may not be that he gave a speech just on the state of Latinos, but everything he did, he communicated with our community in many ways, in the same forms in which other politicians before him have done.
What do you make of his use of Spanish, the way he speaks Spanish? And the first commercial that he ran in Spanish in the campaign, we were all shocked. And a lot of people accused him of using AI, an AI voice, generated voice. So, what do you make of that connection that he does in Spanish? Because we always made fun of, or people used to make fun of Michael Bloomberg's Spanish, or even Bill de Blasio's. Eric Adams never spoke Spanish per se, or even Andrew Cuomo, the former governor. So, what do you make of his use of Spanish when it comes to trying to communicate or connect with Spanish-speaking New Yorkers?
Leaders and reporters make fun of Mike Bloomberg's Spanish, not regular people. Regular people always appreciate when someone tries to reach out, even if they sound stupid, funny, different. This dude, mayor now, has a great dexterity for languages. So he sounds fantastic in Spanish. So people think, oh, it can be true. It has to be AI generated. And I enjoyed the digitals that then he posted on making 1,000 mistakes to get a paragraph right in Spanish. People appreciate when elected officials try. That is as important, if not more important, than just surrounding yourself with a whole bunch of Latino leaders and then have a record of nothingness in our community.
What's your connection or your relationship with the new mayor? Do you talk to him, or have you met him personally? Have you?
I have met him personally. I did. I am now retired. I'm going to do other stuff with my life. Happy to support the city in any way I can, except working for any mayor anymore. That's a long gone. But happy to make the city better. So when I'm reached out by tourism and convention to do commercials on making sure that the Latino flavor of the city is portrayed to the world, I'll do anything that it's within my power to continue to make this now my home. Listen, I'm going to be buried now in New York. For many, many years, I was going to be buried in Vega Alta. And I made that switch. So I'll do anything I can to make my home a better place.
Taking off the partisan hat for a second, can you tell me something that Donald Trump does well as president or as a politician?
He insults anybody and everyone except the cadre of incompetence that he has around. And he is great at it, and sometimes even funny. So I wish I could talk. There hasn't been a politician in my lifespan that I cannot speak something positive about. There was a time where I could even support Republicans because part of their platform was a key element, like Puerto Rico. For me, it's key for women to make choices of their body, abortion, a path to citizenship, seeing government as a force for good. All key parts. And I could talk about Republicans and Democrats for whom that was part of their ethos. This guy has none of that, Juan Manuel. I wish I could point to something, but I can't. To start wars so that the Epstein files become second or third in the news? It's unbelievable to me that you go and invade a country and kill people, and there's no imminent threat other than the Epstein imminent threat. This guy is just pure evil.
Have you ever met him?
I met him a long, long time ago when Hurricane Hugo hit Puerto Rico in the early 90s, and I was beginning the Hispanic Federation. He lent us one of his many failed enterprises. He lent us a plane to take a sanitation crew and things to Puerto Rico right after that hurricane. And I met him briefly to thank him for doing that. You don't have to do anything in life. You do things because you want to. And it's the only time. So this is 30 plus years ago. And I'm glad I have never been faced with the reality of seeing him, because I would want to spit on him. I would want to scream at him. So it's better not even for it to be a fantasy rather than a reality I have to deal with.
Let's switch gears. You had a heart attack and delayed going to the ER because you didn't want to pay $50 for parking. What does it say about Luis Miranda?
It says that I want to spend my money rightly. I don't mind spending $50 in some program that it's helping people. It always amazes me that the issue of affordability in New York permeates everything we see. First of all, I was not having the heart attack yet. Otherwise, I probably would have just drive into the parking. I was just not feeling well. And I knew I had enough time when alternate, yeah, as a New Yorker, when alternate side it's on. So I was just trying to find the place where I could be there until 11. Remember, I had no idea I was having a heart attack. I thought I was going to go to a doctor because my doctor was telling me go to the emergency room. First thing I asked the doctor at the hospital is, do you think I'll be gone by 11? Because that's when I have to move my car. But I'd rather spend money, and I don't mind spending money in things that I believe are dividends for my family, for my friends, for others.
You've also said that your son, Lin-Manuel, got a huge mic with Hamilton and immediately shared it with the whole family. What has that mic allow you to do that you couldn't do before?
For my wife, who has been a worker with poor women all of her life, and a supporter of reproductive rights and abortion. It has allowed her to be in the Planned Parenthood board. It has allowed her to make sure she supports uh, everything around that issue, and that she continues to be committed to poor women. It has allowed us to support the possibility of Black and brown kids to get into the arts. It has allowed us to do campaigns for immigration and immigrant organizations at a time where we are under attack. So it has been a fantastic mic to push forward the things we believe in.
And for someone who was so used to running campaigns in New York City and close to the political world, Hamilton also opened up the doors of Hollywood for someone like you. How was that? How was that transition from a political consultant and lobbyist in New York City, New York State, to going to Hollywood
And Broadway. Uh, listen,
and Broadway? Yes.
I, I have been in the communication industry for a long time. I see these new openings as the possibility of helping myself and others tell stories that are not being told. Have Black and brown people represented in places where they were few. So it is just the next step of making sure that we have a pluralistic society, that we have a diverse society, that we have diverse ideas that are being discussed throughout. And it's just a new chapter uh, with, at the end, the same goals in mind.
You blast show tunes at 6 o'clock in the morning to wake up your family. So, is there a new song this week that you're blasting in the morning?
First of all, I always have a song in my head, uh, which can be very annoying. When you're trying to concentrate and you're doing something that is boring or shitty, to have a fantastic song in your head is a huge distraction. And I was telling Lin-Manuel yesterday, but I just became a great grandfather. And yesterday we were meeting our new great grandson. His name is Nico.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. And I saw Lin-Manuel is working on a new musical. It's Warriors. He had done the album a year or so ago, and we had a workshop. And some of the songs of Warriors cannot leave me alone. Uh, you know, a catchy tune when you leave a Broadway musical and that song is pululando in your head and repeating itself. So Warriors have been in my head. Yesterday, we went to see a show, and when I came back, I started blasting uh, My Fair Lady, the original recording of My Fair Lady sang by Julie Andrews. Uh, so there's always new and old, and I love that. It really gives color and meaning to my life.
What's the last book that you read that really was really meaningful? That you really enjoyed?
I'm a bit of a nerd. I have read and literally just finished reading again Kornaki's book on politics and statistics and political attributes. I've read that book 3 times and took it with me to a trip and finished reading it again. And every time I read it, I learn something new.
Is there a museum that you normally go to that you go often because you find new things every time you go?
When we go to Puerto Rico, we go to Museo de Puerto Rico and Museo de Arte Contemporáneo. But we go much more to plays and musicals than museum.
No museum here in New York City.
I go to Museo del Barrio, I go to MoMA. For a long time, when Miguel was little, we became members of the American Museum of Natural History and went there every day of my life because they had a room where kids could do homework. And when Miguel left school, he went there. For a while, I thought he was going to become a curator at the museum, since for 2 years, we were there every afternoon during weekdays.
And Luis, do you use artificial intelligence at all? Like for someone who works with numbers, statistics, polling, any use of AI?
I actually don't. I still do mathematical operations in my head,
Mm-hmm.
but I will use the normal programs to take a look at a paragraph that I wrote. English is still my second language, and I never hit send unless someone who knows more English than me takes a look at that. Now, artificial intelligence can be that I don't have to wait for my wife to read it and conjugate a verb correctly.
And last question, Luis. So, what's the best advice you've ever gotten from someone who had no political power?
Be patient. My dad used to say it all the time. I remember once I was living in New York already, and I was renewing my driver's license in Puerto Rico because for me that was a symbol that I never left. So I had a New York license, but I renewed my license in Puerto Rico. And the level of inefficiency was so amazing that my dad could see how I was getting increasingly frustrated. And he's like, Jesus Christ, the license will appear. First of all, you don't need this license. You already have a New York City license. So if you want to have this second license, this is the way it is in Puerto Rico. Just go and buy a coffee. Take it easy. So many people through life, starting now, my kids are the ones who say it the most. It's like, breathe, and then move on.
Luis Miranda, thank you so much. That was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me, Juan Manuel. Y no te me pierda.
No, we'll talk soon.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this conversation, subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Substack. In New York City, I'm Juan Manuel Benítez.